Hello and welcome to another episode of Shattered Lives, Reach Ireland's crime podcast for the Irish Daily Star and Irish Mirror. I'm crime and defence editor Michael O'Toole, and I'm joined as ever by our crime correspondent Paul Healy. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Michael.
So you today were in Court 13 of the CCJ for the ongoing trial of Jozef Puska. Now, just to recap, our wee anchor paragraph, as I call it, Mr. Puska is charged with the murder of Ashling Murphy on the 12th of January 2022 at Cappincur, Grand Canal Way in Cappincur in Tullamore in County Offaly. Now, Mr. Puska, who has an address at Linally Grove in Muckley, also in County Offaly, denies the charge, and he is on trial in front of a jury of 9 men and 3 women, and Mr. Justice Tony Hunt. So, Paul, today was we're calling it day 13 of the case against Mr. Puska.
Yeah, it's day 13. Technically, yesterday, day 12, nothing happened. The jury were told that matters could not proceed, and so there was no evidence as such heard yesterday, but the jury were in the room, so by all accounts, it was the 12th day of the trial. Today's the 13th day of the trial, and I suppose we'll start with the beginning of the day, but it's worth noting just at the top that today the prosecution finalised their case, and that the defendant himself, that is Jozef Puska, has now taken the witness stand in his own defence.
So that's obviously very significant, and we are going to talk about that. We are going to hear your report from the appearance on the stand of Mr. Puska. But let's go forward, as I always say. So there was some evidence before Mr. Puska took to the stand. In other words, as you said, Paul, it was the end of the prosecution case. Now, some of it was quite technical, but there was also some recording or videos, I believe, of Mr. Puska while he was in Garda custody.
Yeah, so the witness here was Ian McPhillips. He's one of the 2 final witnesses in the prosecution's case. And Ian McPhillips is a senior analyst, crime analyst, and was involved in putting together maps and various CCTV stills in the case. And also, you may recall the Fitbit evidence, Mick, that was given in the trial. He was collating all of that information into a series of stills. So we saw 51 slides, that is, were shown to the jury today, showing various different points of interest on the map and showing images, CCTV images to go with that of the accused man, Mr. Puska, on the bike, and also some images of the victim in this case, Ashling Murphy.
Yeah, I believe there was a still image played or shown to the jury of Miss Murphy in Tullamore on the day she died.
Yes, the court was shown. We have seen stills of Miss Murphy along the canal walk there in Cappincur. We were shown one particular still that was obviously an emotional moment for the family in the courtroom today, to be shown that particular still. There were various different stills shown, and just, we don't propose to go through all this because we've gone through it before, but it was effectively a timeline, really, of the alleged movements of Mr. Puska timed with CCTV, and the movements of Miss Murphy timed with CCTV, and also with the Fitbit, which shows activity right up until 15:21 when things became erratic.
So just to clarify, it was a slide and a series, 51 slides, I think, but was it also a map? Was it effectively a map that was shown to the jury?
Yes, some slides were of a map. Some consisted of a map along with a CCTV image to correlate with it. So dependent upon the slide, it was either a map, CCTV, or a combination of both. Okay,
so, and as you say, that's quite technical. Can we move on? Detective Superintendent Patrick O'Callaghan gives a small bit of evidence, I believe.
Yeah, no, the detective superintendent has already been on the stand, so he wasn't sworn back in. So he's not one of the 2 new witnesses heard today, but he was recalled to the stand in relation to some outstanding questions in the case that both sides had. And Defence Counsel Michael Bowman had questions in relation to an incident that happened after the murder of Miss Murphy, whereupon an email was sent to the Garda press office by an individual who we are not naming, wasn't named before the court. And this individual said that they are the person responsible for the murder of Ashling Murphy, and that they were wearing a tracksuit similar to the one that Gardaí were looking for a description of the suspect for. They then subsequently, so Mr. Bowman was looking to establish what did Gardaí do with this particular information, and the detective superintendent said they went and they sought out this person, and this person was subsequently interviewed by Gardaí. This person was quite apologetic. They said they had ADHD, that they were on antidepressants, and that they were likely intoxicated at the time of sending the email that they didn't recall sending. They apologized and said that they were an idiot and that they had nothing to do with the murder of Miss Murphy.
And I believe there was also evidence that he said, as you say, I didn't murder her, and I hope this doesn't cause any trouble.
Yeah, he said, I hope this doesn't cause any trouble. And Mr. Bowman was looking to establish, well, what did you do next? And the superintendent said that they did ultimately determine that this man was not involved, that they did their homework, so to speak, and that they determined that he had no involvement in that in the murder of Miss Murphy.
And I also believe and we know that there was a Romanian man who was arrested and subsequently released after DNA and fingerprints cleared him. And he was released. He was the first person who was arrested. And I think there was a small bit of evidence about him as well today, Paul.
Yeah, just evidence in relation to, where they satisfied, were Gardaí satisfied that this individual had, that the Romanian man who was arrested, it was established that he was nowhere near the canal. And the detective superintendent said he was satisfied that he was nowhere near the canal on the day Miss Murphy was killed, at the time Miss Murphy was killed.
Right. So next, really, what we're talking about is a series of interviews of Mr. Puska while he was in Garda custody. I think from memory, he was arrested on the 18th of January, 2022,
Correct,
and he was charged at 1942 the following day, the 19th, so 18 minutes to 8 in the evening on the 19th. But I if memory serves, there were a number of interviews, and we went through some of them today, I believe.
Yeah, we went through all of them. There were 5 interviews with Jozef Puska on the 18th and 19th of January, as you say, when he was under arrest and brought to Tullamore Garda Station. And the final witness in the case was bringing us through that. So that was Detective Garda Colin O'Leary, and he was involved in some of these interviews, and indeed we heard some of his questions to Mr. Puska. There were also other members of Garda Síochána involved in these interviews. So there were a series of 5 interviews, as I say, some of which took place on the 18th. Then there was a break overnight, and the remaining interviews occurred on the 19th of January.
Just now, look, we're going through this slightly quickly because we do want to get to Mr. Puska's direct evidence. But I see from your tweets that he was asked if he knew Miss Ashling Murphy.
Yeah, so sorry, the first interview occurred there just at 5 to 4 and kind of went through sort of just who he was, where he's from, his work history, and where he was living at the time and all of that. And ultimately got to the question of, did he know Ashling Murphy? And he said no, that he had never met her. And he was asked, did he understand what he was being asked? And he said that he did. He was asked, did he know of the murder of Miss Murphy? He said he didn't know about it. He was asked, did he read it in the news? He said that he didn't, and that he has a poor understanding of English, so he wouldn't have heard about it.
And I also understand that he would have said that he did live previously in Bratislava, and then he moved to the Czech Republic, where he worked there for 5 years, I believe, worked there on building sites, and then he came to Ireland in 2013, so 9 years before the death of Miss Murphy.
Yes, and then ultimately went and lived in Mucklagh in 2022. Just in relation...
That would have been, obviously, it's alleged that Miss Murphy died on the 12th of January in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So... he obviously must have been quite soon before that. He obviously, if he moved in January in 2022, it was obviously before that.
Yes, well, he had another address in Churchill and then subsequently went to live in Mucklagh. So he was working, the court had heard, up until he had a back injury, a slip disc, and then he'd taken a pension and he was out of work. And he was also asked questions about whether he drove, and he said he doesn't drive, that he takes taxis and buses. He'd be in and out of Tullamore for shopping. He was asked by Gardaí to bring them through his day, and he said that his day involves looking after his kids, particularly the youngest kids, and bringing the other kids to school. In terms of what he does outside of that, he said he would have played sports, but because of his injury, he no longer plays any sports, and that predominantly most of his time is spent looking after his children.
Okay, and then what did he say next? He would spend the mornings with his kids, getting them to school, and the younger kids after that.
Yeah, and just basically just kind of repetitive questions just about his, what he does during the day before they got to, what he was there for, asking him the questions about Miss Murphy's murder. And it was directly just said to him that the murder took place on the 12th of January, 2022. And Mr. Puska said, I don't know. And he was asked the question then, do you like running? And he said, yes. He was said, the Gardaí said to him, we simply want to know what happened. And he said, I don't know. And he was then asked if he was okay and if he wanted to stand up, and he indicated that he did at that stage want to stand up. Then there was a break, I understand, and they went back asking about his work history, what he did during the day, how he minded the children, and basically about his day and where he lives. Then he was asked, did he have anything he wanted to amend before signing the memorandum, and that concluded the first interview before they then went into the second interview later that evening.
So that was at 1932 on the 18th.
Yeah, and he was cautioned. So we heard this every time, just evidence of how he was cautioned and how he was told to asked, did he understand that he was cautioned? And during all of this, Mr. Puska had his solicitor and also an interpreter in the courtroom with him. And he indicated each time that he did understand the caution and that he would sign the caution. So the interview actually commenced then at 1935 with Detective Sergeant Maria Castle. And he was asked about the murder of Miss Murphy. That was the reason why he was there. He said he understood, and he was shown a picture first of his hand, the picture that was taken in St. James's Hospital on the 14th of January, and he couldn't recall that particular photograph being taken. And he was asked, about the murder of Miss Murphy and whether or not he knew her, and he said, I didn't see her, I don't know her. He was shown a photograph of Ashling Murphy at that point in time, so he was shown that photograph, and he said, I don't know her. He was then told, look, you know where you were that day. You're telling me you don't know who Ashling Murphy was. And he was told that she was brutally murdered on the 12th of January 2022. And his response to that was, I never saw her, first on this picture, pointing to the photograph that he was shown.
And that was Detective Sergeant Maria Castle and Detective Garda Padraig Hanley were in the second interview. Okay, that's fine. So then there was another consultation with his solicitor, and more fingerprints were taken, and he had his detention extended at 11:15 p.m. by 12 hours, and it was suspended overnight. And it started until 8 o'clock the next day, and he had another consultation with his solicitor at 8:50, and then he was brought into the interview room at 9:10 on the 19th for his third interview.
Yes. And again, he was cautioned, understood that he was cautioned. And this time he was being interviewed by Detective Garda Shane Jennings and Detective Garda Colin O'Leary, who was the detective on the stand giving the evidence. And he had a different interpreter this time, Miroslav Sedlacek, who actually gave evidence in this trial as well. So in relation to that third interview, so we had a break at lunchtime today and we came back to that. And he was basically brought through very similar questions again before being asked about CCTV footage. And that was shown to him, and he was asked to identify himself in various different points in time and going around Tullamore. And he said that was him. He was pointing out the locations on the map, and did he understand where he was? And he said that he did. So I don't propose to go through all them, but there's Flynn Centre, Charleville Road, getting up to the Circle K and to the Tesco and to the area in which he's alleged to have been following this other lady. And he was asked the question about whether or not he was following that lady. I will come to that in a minute. But he was again asked, had he ever met or did he ever know Ashling Murphy? And he said, no, never seen her before. He was then told that she was a primary school teacher and that she would have taught kids, and that he had kids of a similar age. And he again said that he didn't know her. He was asked, did he meet a girl like that on the 12th of January? That's the way the question was phrased at that time. And he said, no. He was then
he was then asked if he had any contact with her. And again, he said no.
Again, he said no, that he had no contact with her. He was shown a CCTV image of himself on the main street in Tullamore on a bike, and asked, was there any similarities with the bike in the footage and bike that he would have owned? And he said, yeah. He was then kind of led through DNA, and does he understand the significance of DNA? And he said that he does. The recording was then stopped. There were DVDs being used to record the interview. We actually heard that Mr. Puska did not consent to the electronic recording. So that was noted by the Gardaí that interviewed him. he was asked then about meeting the Gardaí in the hospital, the Gardaí from Blanchardstown and Crumlin Garda Station, who interviewed him. And you may recall that the evidence before the court is that Mr. Puska confessed to the murder, or allegedly confessed to the murder of Miss Murphy, to the Gardaí in the hospital. He said that he couldn't remember meeting those Gardaí.
And then he was asked about a woman behind her. Was that a woman behind her or behind him?
Yeah, so this is in relation to the lady who says that she believes she was being followed at the McDonald's from the McDonald's onwards until the more earlier, just before the murder of Miss Murphy. And he was asked to look at that footage, and basically he said he didn't identify himself at that point in time, but he said that man in the footage, if he's following her, why does he pass her? Is the way that he basically described that. Again, he was asked again a third time in relation to recognizing Ashling Murphy, and he had confirmed that he didn't know her. We get to the fourth interview. I think I've lost place. Sorry.
Yeah. So it was basically told. It was basically, from what I can see from your notes, he was asked that the Detective Gordon Hanley or Sergeant Castle said there's a huge amount of revenue for Pixie there. Do you accept that? And his answer was no. So obviously, the definiteness.
Yeah, he said he didn't accept that. As I say, we went through evidence in relation to the interviews in, the interviews in the hospital, and he said that he couldn't recall that. Said that he was on medication at the time, that he'd just come out of surgery, and he didn't have any recollection of meeting with the Gardaí. And then the fifth interview was in relation to basically it was put to him that the guards had specific evidence against him in relation to DNA, in relation to his bike and his movements generally on the day. And he was given an opportunity with each and every one of these to give an account for all of that. And he was warned under legislation that if, depending upon his answer, that could be used in evidence against him in a trial before a jury, depending upon his answer. And he indicated that he understood that. So I want to go through just kind of each of them because they're important, obviously, to the case. So the first one was in relation to the bike. And the bike basically was recovered, if you recall, close to the scene there in Cappenker where Miss Murphy died. And he was asked about that bike and in relation to DNA that was found belonging to him. And they were basically saying to him, we can link this bike to you forensically and therefore put you at the scene. So in relation to the bike, he was asked to give comment as to whether if he could account for that bike being at the location at that point in time. And he offered no comment in relation to that.
Okay, so in relation to the bike, Paul.
Yeah, in relation to the bike, he told Gardaí, I am not giving an explanation to this. He was then asked by the Detective Garda, could he give an account for the fact that his own DNA was found under the right and left fingernails of Ashling Murphy, who he had repeatedly told them he'd never met during interviews. And he said, I will not comment on that. And he was told at that point in time that Miss Murphy, that the DNA under her fingernails would indicate that she fought for her life and that she would have used her fingernails to do so. And his response to that was, I will not comment on that. He also said he wouldn't comment in relation to the account of him being in the location at the time at 3:34 p.m. And he was told that he was forensically linked via the bike and Miss Murphy's fingernails. And he said, I don't want to comment on that. No.
Okay. So are we now on to the direct evidence of Mr. Puska, or was there anything left in the videos?
Yeah, no, that concluded effectively the prosecution's case. Now, we went for a break and we came back, and then the prosecuting barrister, Anne-Marie Lawler, said that she wanted to formally say that she was closing the prosecution's case. And following that, the defense counsel, Mr. Michael Bowman, called the defendant, Jozef Puska, to the stand.
So he went up to the stand, and because he's a defense witness, it's Michael Bowman is asking the questions.
Yeah, Michael Bowman is asking questions, and then there will be an opportunity for cross-examination with the prosecution. But the point where we are now is where Mr. Bowman is effectively asking questions of his own client. And so Mr. Puska, like every witness, but we're just going through the motions of everything that happens here. Mr. Puska had his hair down today. So for every other day of the trial, the jury has seen Mr. Puska wearing a ponytail. Today he didn't have a ponytail, his hair was down, and he was wearing a light grey suit, and he got up from where he's normally sitting and stood up and got into the witness box, and he sat down next to an interpreter, the court interpreter, a Slovakian interpreter. So they are sitting side by side up now in the witness box together. So he's moved from where he normally is. Okay. So but prior to doing that, he put his hand on the Bible and he swore to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. And then he sat down, gave his name, and Mr. Bowman began questioning him.
Just before you get into what he actually said in evidence, Paul, how long would he have been on the stand for, roughly?
That's a good question. I would say no more than really a half an hour, to be honest with you. We kind of only got into it about 3:30 and things concluded about 4 o'clock. So he's only on the stand now about a half an hour.
No, so I didn't want to spring that on you, but I was just reading your tweets and I was just interested. And I know were I in your position, I probably wouldn't be looking at the clock because you're too busy writing down everything Mr. Puska said. But I was just interested to see how long he had been on the stand for before the end.
It about a half hour is correct. So yeah, he was asked just to begin giving an account of his movements on the day of the 12th of January, starting with when he was at his house. And he said at around 11:30, he went out on his push bike and travelled in the direction of Tullamore. And he said he went to the Charleville Road, out past the County Council building, a train station, and he had a map in front of him. So this might sound unusual when you look at it, but on the map, it has various locations of interest, and it would have said Garda Camera number 4. And he said, I passed Garda Camera number 4. And then he was asked by Mr. Bowman, around what time do you estimate you got into Tullamore? And he said he wasn't sure, but maybe around 12:15. And then Mr. Bowman said if the accused agrees that there is CCTV footage shown throughout the trial that shows him at various stages in the town on his bike, and he confirmed that there is. He was asked to describe the bike that he was on, and he said it was a Storm Falcon bike, a black dark push bike with a green front. And he was then shown a photograph that was taken of the bike, which has already been shown to the jury in this case, and asked, is that the same bike? And he says that's the same bike. Go ahead, yeah.
Then he was asked if he could recollect a lady walking a dog.
Yeah, he was asked if he could recollect a lady walking a dog. And we've heard from this lady, this is Anne-Marie Kelly, and she gave evidence in the trial that she believed that she was being followed by this man on a bike who has identified himself as being Jozef Puska. So he was asked, could he remember that? And Mr. Puska asked, can I start right from the beginning of his own recollection of this? So he said he passed Church Road, went towards McDonald's, and that it was somewhere around there that he passed this lady. He then he kind of went on in his narrative and said he went up to the car park by the canal, went towards a bridge, and at this stage was pushing his bike, and he lit a cigarette. So Mr. Bowman kind of took him back and said, can I go back to this lady that you went past at the McDonald's? And he said, look, the court has already heard that this lady is Anne-Marie Kelly and that she believed that she was being followed by you that day. So that allegation was put directly to Mr. Puska on the stand. Mr. Puska said, not at all. This was not my intention at all. This is the truth, that I was behind her, but there was no bad intention whatsoever. I was riding the same way. I was riding the same way around town. I had no intention to follow anybody at all.
Okay.
That effectively ended Mr. Puska's evidence for the day, because Mr. Justice Tony Hunt said that's enough for the day. And to be fair, we heard a lot of evidence today. So that concludes matters for today. We're actually back at an earlier time of 10:30 tomorrow for more of Mr. Puska on the witness stand.
Great stuff, Paul, and thanks a lot for that. We just decided we wanted to get this out quickly today, so
you can see me in pitch black here.
yeah, it's very dramatic, I suppose. But thanks everybody for watching and possibly listening. But we just wanted to get this out because we thought it was a strong day.
Yeah, we appreciate everybody for listening and watching. So thanks very much.
Thanks very much. We'll talk again soon.